Today is November 18th, 2025. My name is Anna Portillo, and I am a digital humanities intern with Dr. Jason Higgins at Virginia Tech. I am in Blacksburg, Virginia at the Virginia Tech University Libraries. Joining me for an oral history interview is,
Jason Neiswinter.
and I'm also joined by,
James Mathai.
who is also a digital humanities intern with me. This interview is part of the Pride Stories Oral History Project with LGBTQ alumni from Virginia Tech. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I appreciate it. Do I have your consent to record this interview?
Yes.
Awesome. And then, just as a reminder, you don't have to answer any questions that you don't want to, and that we can stop, pause, or take a break at any time. And then you will also have the opportunity to review the footage from this and what we end up cutting up and putting together, just to make sure that you're okay with everything.
Sounds good.
Amazing. Okay, so do you mind sharing your pronouns?
Yes. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his.
Awesome. And then, where are you from?
So originally from just outside of Richmond, but a lot of my childhood I actually grew up in Chicago, so I kind of say both.
Gotcha. Did you live in like urban Chicago?
Oh yeah. So I grew up on the north side, in a neighborhood called Lakeview East, which is about like two neighborhoods away from Wrigley Field. So in the city proper.
Awesome. And then where were you living before you went to Virginia Tech, like in high school?
Yeah. So in high school, I started out in Chicago, and then my sophomore year, my mom and I moved back to the area that she pretty much grew up in. So I graduated from a high school called Colonial Heights High School, which is about 30 minutes south of Richmond. And that's where I was living and kind of doing a little bit of community college before transferring to Virginia Tech in 2014.
Gotcha. Awesome. And then can you tell me a little bit about your parents and family?
Sure. What do you want to know?
Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have a younger brother, who is 7 years younger than me. We have different moms. I pretty much grew up with a single mom for the most part. Um, so my dad was kind of in and out a little bit in my childhood, and then was out for a while. And then we reconnected later on in life, more in my kind of late teens, early 20s. My 20s was kind of when we really kind of solidly connected. So my relationship with my dad's family has really mostly blossomed over the last decade or so. But I grew up really close to my mom's family. Um, and it was just kind of me and my mom growing up for the most part. Um, there was something else I was gonna add to that, and I zoned. It's like somewhere in there. I had other things I was gonna say. Um, so my mom is the eldest of three girls. And my grandma is kind of like the matriarch of the family. My mom's dad passed when I was really young, when I was 4. So I really kind of grew up in a family that was like very female dominant, like strong, independent women. And I'm the eldest grandchild on both sides of my family. Um, so no pressure there, right? Um, and so I also have two younger cousins on my mom's side through my mom's youngest sister, one who's actually the same age as my brother, and also 7 years younger than me, and then another one who was born actually right before I transferred to tech. So I had taken a semester of community college off between transferring to tech and my previous school, to help raise and take care of my youngest cousin. So
I do have a question.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, when you mentioned being the oldest grandchild of everybody,
Hmm.
um, when you were thinking of one, sorry,
Hmm.
did you ever come out to your family, like extended family?
Yes. So because my family is like pretty small, I think, in the grand scheme of things. And I think like the way that our family dynamics and relationships are, like I'm so close to I think what most people would call extended family. Like they're more of my intermediate family, at least just in terms of our dynamics and how I was raised. And I came out at 16. So in high school, in a very conservative town, in a very conservative high school where there were not a lot of people like me, and my family, because I was so close with my mom's family growing up, they were kind of the first ones that I had talked to as I was kind of exploring and navigating, but it still wasn't easy. Um, Despite growing up in a pretty like open, loving, like my mom, because like I grew up, in Chicago. I was down the street from Boys Town. Like the Pride Parade was in my neighborhood every year, right? Like I grew up with Chicago's Pride, which is pretty wild in the grand scheme of all national prides if you've ever been. And so like queerness was always kind of present in my life to an extent. Maybe we just didn't really think about it or talk about it too much. But when I did come out, to my family, I first came out actually as a lesbian, and that lasted about like 2 seconds because then it was like, no, I actually there's more to this. Um, and a lot of what inspired me to come out or even kind of helped me discover that I was trans was my sophomore year or my junior year of high school. Somewhere in that time frame is when Chaz Bono had come out with his story on like a 2020 special, one of those nighttime specials, and I was like, oh, and I watched that with my family, right? Um, and then as I was kind of struggling to figure out, like, wait a minute, like, wait, that's a thing. I'm like, that resonates. My family wasn't. It was an adjustment. It was one thing to be for my sexual orientation to be, different from what I think they had assumed growing up, but it was another thing to be like, actually, I don't feel like my body aligns with what has always felt, I've always felt something was kind of off. And so they weren't super nice and it was very difficult. My family dynamic shifted tremendously in high school. And I was even kind of isolated from them a lot. And then with my dad's family, because I didn't grow up with them as much, um I think at first it was definitely difficult. And I do remember like my grandparents on my dad's side sort of blaming my dad a little bit, because it was that sort of like, you weren't around, and like if you were around, this wouldn't have happened sort of deal. But that was just kind of the nature of the generation, sort of where they came from, and like understood I understood the logic, um even though it's not necessarily true, because I was even dealing with some of these things. I mean, I've known I was different since I was 5, and um that my dad was around, it wouldn't have made a difference, to be honest. But they were kind of trying to figure out, like, I think it was just in that processing, they were like, where do we place the blame, and like, this is whatever. But then actually they were incredibly receptive, and I visited them, and it was like, you would have never known, because they were pretty much on top of like my grandparents, and they've both since passed, but they were just like, we love you. It was never really like a topic. And eventually, like, my entire family, now if you come into my family, like if I wasn't doing things like this where I was speaking openly about my identity and my story, like if you came into my family, you really would never know, because of how everybody has just been open, accepting, and loving. So I'm very privileged in that sense, that both sides of my family have been very receptive, and just very open to kind of accepting me for me.
That's so sweet. I'm really happy about that. Yeah. I do have a question. You talked about your like upon reflecting when you were like 5, kind of thinking, noticing that you were different. Can you expand on that a little?
Yeah. Man, I like don't think about it as much as I used to, right? Getting older now, so memory is getting fuzzy. But I don't know. It's I think it's just like it's one of those things that's really difficult to like kind of pinpoint or explain. But I was always very much like protesting anything to do with anything feminine or girly. I didn't want anything to do with it. You know, my mom is like, and my mom was like, all right, cool, like tomboy, whatever. Like, you know, we're here for it. Because my mom has like tomboyish tendencies too, right? But my mom is like tomboy with hot pink clothing and like things like that. Like she still loves and embraces and is very much into her feminine side, but I like wanted nothing to do with it, you know, like whereas like all these kids my age, what my generation grew up with American Girl dolls and everybody was like really into that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and sure I had FOMO just because I wanted to fit in. I very much was like assimilate like I need to fit into groups, but at the harder things I don't think I actually really cared about like those kinds of toys. I wanted to be like I was all sports. Like let's go play football. Um you know, when my dad he used to coach a pee wee league like little league football whatever and I was like dad like put me in I want to play on the field and he's like no, you're gonna get hurt. Like that's not for like not for you. I'd have to like fight to do more of the sort of like masculine boy activities when I was with my dad because even he was trying to push me towards like no, not for you, and I'd have to like do like arguments and it was it was like having to basically like a whole dissertation on like why I should be allowed to, you know, like why I should be allowed to do this. All the boy stuff. And my mom was always like, "All right, cool," but it was very frustrating because even when we would go shopping and she tried to pick out clothes for me and I'd be like, "No. Like I want like just put me in like either jeans and a t-shirt or sporty clothing and that's all I want." Um and I it was really funny because even in first grade, so I went to a Catholic school from first through fourth grade, um, and you know you have to wear a uniform, but in the after school program you could wear whatever you wanted, and so immediately I remember as a kid I would like I'd strip down to that like white tank top and jeans, and I'd throw on this like old busted denim cap that I had, and my yellow Walkman and I just like 6 years old just walking around after school like you know and then going playing sports and doing all the things that like I felt more comfortable kind of in and I always hung out with boys. I hung out boys actually with boys more before I transitioned than um since transitioning, which is sort of an interesting switch, but um I just always felt like something was off, you know. I and that was a it was a common theme throughout my entire life. I would have like nights where, you know, I didn't grow up religious, but going to a religious based school and things and having a lot of exposure to it, I would just like I remember being even in middle school and like struggling with my sexuality as well and being like, yo, why am I not normal? Like, God, like, what's up? Like, just crying at night, like, the things that keep you up at night, even as a kid. And so, um, I think once, you know, as I mentioned before, once Chaz Bono, like, kind of came out with their story and some of the common themes that they were talking about as they were sharing their journey, I was like, that has been my entire life. Like that makes sense. And I just didn't have the language when I was a kid. I just knew something was off.
Thank you. Do you mind expanding for those that don't know about Chaz Bono?
Yeah. So, especially for some of the younger generations who might not be as familiar. Chaz Bono is Cher's son, and hopefully you know Cher because she's a queer icon in her own right. So Sonny and Cher, big time musicians back in the day, um, and their child, um, originally actually earlier on in their life. It was even a big deal when before they sort of. I'm trying to pick the right language here, so forgive me. This is first draft language. See, I'm even part of the community, and I can't even get in. Oh, are we good? I saw
Yeah.
the jump, so I just want. Um.
Hmm.
So, they grew up in the public eye as Chastity Bono, um, and I know this might still even have preceded my time, but growing up before high school, always knew them as Chastity, and they were in the public eye. They'd been on their parents' show, um, and it was even a really big deal when Chastity came out as a lesbian. Like you can kind of dive deeper and look into all of that, right? But then in like the mid 2000, 2010, 2011 ish, there was that feature special where actually, you know, they were on this journey where they discovered, oh, I'm transgender, came out, and then throughout this special, really talked about what those challenges were like, and you got to see, even they had like footage of Chaz getting like a tee shot in the special, and it just kind of walked through this journey of self discovery and really becoming who they really are. So that's a little bit helpful context.
Thank you. Um, do you mind me asking, what were like the common themes that like you felt really resonated with you with that?
Hard to remember now, just because it was like, oh, oh my god, like almost half my lifetime ago. So right,
Wow.
because I was I was 16 at the time, and I'm gonna be 32 in June. So it's a little bit hard to like pinpoint exactly what in the special, like as I was sitting there watching it, stuck out at me. But I think I just remember like that was just the very first time I'd ever seen or been exposed to transness from in the sense of like female to male, right? Because like you, I grew up and had been exposed to drag queens, and and was used to the queer community in different ways, but I hadn't seen somebody who, I think this was probably the first time that I'd really seen someone who had, you know, started out in life as female and then transitioned to male, and I was like, I hadn't, it just wasn't something I'd seen before. And um and then after that, that sort of became the catalyst of like I started doing all sorts of research. Like I was like, and that was when there was nothing really on the, like, you're like borderline, I'm about to enter the dark web just to find something, right? Because there were like zero resources, very very limited ones. YouTube, I had found a couple of other trans guys that I was like, okay, all right, like the wheels started turning, and I learned a lot more. And this was all things that I was doing on my own. I was very alone in this journey for a good portion of the beginning. There were a handful of friends at school, and mind you, I had just transferred to this school a year before. So, and it took me half a year to even get the friends I had, and then I was isolating myself from some of those friends because at the time they, were in very devout religious families that were going to church regularly. Um, and I just felt like I didn't have people to talk to about it. Um, but that's going off of what you answered or what you asked. So I was like, I'm going on a tangent. Wait.
I wonder if I could jump in with a question because I know you said that you had come out at 16. Did you come out to your family at the same time as your friends, or like what was the sort of timeline on that?
That's a really good question. So it's really funny because at school there was never really a formal coming out process, and I'll get to that in a second because I have to laugh. It's a little bit comedic to me when I think back on it. But with my family, I remember my mom. So there was. All right, hold on. Pausing, cycling, thinking through. Speed. Let's think about this in a logical way. Because my memories are all like coming at me at once right now, and I'm like trying to like it's like herding cats in my brain. So even prior to the Chaz Bono thing, I feel like I should back up a little bit. Um, there was a girl in high school who was in my AP US history class that had expressed interest in me. So that kind of opened up the queer gate because remember I had first identified as like, oh, okay, I think I might just be lesbian. Um, and it was a lot of that was because for the first time in my life, like I had crushes on girls and I'd had relationships with boys too, right, in middle school and early high school. Um, but I had crushes on girls for a long time, never really expressed anything, never did anything with it, and then finally someone like had been forward enough to like express interest in me, and I was like, oh, okay, let's kind of like let's jump into that a little bit and explore that. And I started hanging out with this person. It did not go well at all. It was a rough time. Just teenagers being teenagers. And we're cool now though. I love them now. But back then it was like not great. My mom did not approve mainly because of the dynamics of the madness that was going on there. It was never really like an official relationship, but I was like in this exploration phase and my family was very like knowledgeable of that because I was talking about how like I was kind of exploring it, and then finally I think there was just one day I texted my mom and I was like, "Mom, I'm gay." Like like is it, and for my mom that wasn't a surprise. That was never a problem growing up. Even when I was a kid, she was like, "Listen, whatever, like love who you love, like, you know if that's who you are, that's who you are, like I'm not gonna love you any less." um so that was never an issue, but then kind of diving deeper, like that sort of opened up doors. I was getting more on the internet. At the time there was this website called Gay Youth Corner, which was like a very it's like almost like a weird, I mean it looked about as old as like MySpace. If you've ever seen a MySpace page, it was like that, but like its own website for queer teens to just find community, and you're like making friends with all these people on the internet. So I started kind of diving into that a little bit more just to find more people outside of my bubble of a town, because we had queer people, but the ones that were open, like I think I just had a problem with, I didn't want to be grouped with people while I was still figuring out what exactly like where I fit and how I fit into the community. Um so I had a very small handful of friends that knew what I was going through because I knew that they were friends with some of these other queer individuals in our school, and they were just cool and easy to talk to. But it was a very small handful, and I had isolated myself from another group of friends that like I just didn't know how to brace the topic with them, right? Um So with my family, it was a little bit more formal ish, and very difficult conversations there. At school and with friends, it was really interesting because basically one day I looked one way, and then the next day I showed up at school and I was a completely different person. And that was how I came out. That was more of like, it was just like, I I don't really feel like explaining it. The people who knew the struggles knew, and I had friends in high school too who, some guys who were nice enough to give me their hand me downs because I was not at a place yet where my family was buying me the clothes, and they were even hesitant with the haircuts at the time too. Um, and then yeah, I don't even know it's just it's funny because I was I remember I wasn't necessarily like a quieter kid. I was definitely quieter and less talkative. Like I wasn't as confident as I've been since just being Jason. Um but I knew quite a bit of people in the school, and they were all just really confused, and it was really hard to explain. Um cuz again, it was just I mean, even just 15 years ago, it was still pretty, the resources were, like I said, pretty barren at that time. So a lot of people didn't understand, and I just didn't. I don't think I had the energy to explain as much, depending on who it was. Um, but my friends, I'm actually still friends with a couple people from even the friend group that I had isolated myself from, because then we talked through it, and I was like, I wasn't, it had nothing to do with you guys. I just was scared. I was scared because I knew that, I had a lot of friends that were very involved with the church. I had gone to church with them a few times. I remember in high school that there were even some people who were trying to bring me back to church ever since coming out, and they're to kind of grapple with it. I'm like, no, this is just who I am. So, yeah, that's
Very helpful. Thank you.
Do you think you have any, did you take anything away from that experience? Are there regrets or things that you would have done differently, or things that, maybe other people could kind of take some advice from how your coming out went?
yeah, that's a really great question. I actually really appreciate that question. Cause I think the one thing, not so much with school or friends. I think that there isn't anything there that I really kind of think about too much from that time. I think especially because I do have good I actually fared really well. Again, with I was very lucky in high school. I didn't deal with bullying. I dealt with more microaggressions than anything, which I will take over blatant excessive bullying some kids I know go through. So I was very, very lucky in that sense that my friends would still rally, people still hung out with me. Everyone was just, honestly pretty cool for the most part. The people that mattered to me. Um with my family, and this is what I say is just because hindsight is 2020. It's really hard when you're going through it, so I don't think it's necessarily for people who are in the throes of it. But what I came to realize as I got older and once I was more comfortable and things were kind of the calm after the storm, um is that it's a process for families too. um I don't know. I think that for me it was more of it felt more like the rug was ripped out from underneath me with my family because I was so close, and because as I kind of explained the dynamics before, my parents weren't married. I had a single mom, and so my mom's family was all I had. And when I felt like I was losing that, in a sense, at that time, that that I think hurt me more than anything with, like, friends that I had only had for like a, in the grand scheme of things, like a short period of time, right? It was all still isolating nonetheless, but I think with my family it was the hardest. Um and my mom has since, I mean, she's taken accountability a lot for, kind of how she had responded to things and how she was dealing with things. She's actually very, but at the time, and even like kind of just the first couple of years of my social and starting the medical transition, it was a very slow process for her. But like, then when I went away to school, when I finally moved away and went to tech, um, she, I guess, had, I don't know when, but she had joined like one of those parent support groups. She started getting like more involved, um, and then at one point even had me like come back and speak to the group. Um, so I think just like in terms of giving a little bit of grace, like with families, which is a lot easier said than done. Way easier said than done, especially if they're being mean to you or saying mean things or even being passive aggressive. Um, but also just understanding like there is still a processing phase that they have to go through as well, right? Like internally we're processing and we're going through the things, and like in that moment we just need support. We just need to know that we're loved and supported. Um but for something like, you know, being trans, like for someone who's transgender, it's another process. It's a whole other set of processing. I think that happens because you're having to reconcile with the fact that who you've known for, for me it was like 16 years of their life at this point, names, pronouns, all the different all the different things. Like it's a pretty big switch. um some people can adapt like that. It's pretty easy. um and others it's a lot harder. I think what I've noticed is that people in my life who I maybe lost connection with and didn't interact with, during that time. Um, and this was evident uh, when I went to Chicago and I reconnected with some elementary and middle school friends that I hadn't seen in like 20 plus years. Who, like, it was very easy because they've seen sort of the things. It's very easy for them to just Jason, he, him, the ones who are distant because they've had time to like kind of process and practice. Whereas the people closest to you who are a part of your everyday life and have been a part of your everyday life, it's going to take a little bit more time because they're more intimate with you. And I think that that's something that I didn't realize is like just being a little bit more, it was hard to be patient with them. Um, and I kind of, I don't regret, but I do come out of that understanding like some people just need time. Taking space is not a bad thing because then that sometimes can help. Um but I also recognize again that like, and I say it anytime I talk to anyone, that I do have a lot of privilege in that sense, that there are a lot of really good people who have been incredibly respectful and have given me a lot of love and support, even if it took a while to get to where we are today.
Okay. Well, um, so you mentioned that you went back to Chicago. Um, can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, what was like the goal of going back to Chicago? And like around what time period that was?
So I've gone back
Thank
a
you.
couple of times since coming out. I went this last time, and I'd seen some friends who were like, I'm still in touch with some on social media and friends. I think in a more recent experience, which was incredibly surreal on multiple levels. In last September, I want to say, um, a childhood friend of mine, um, that I was really close to in elementary school, had passed away very young. Um, so that's kind of the surreal point number one. Um, and my mom and I were kind of talking back and forth, like, about, do I go? Right? Like, I hadn't talked to them in probably like 15ish years, but from first grade up until I really till I moved um back to Virginia, like, even when I had switched schools and everything, like, she and her identical twin sister, like, we were still friends. Like, we still maintained that friendship um for like that first early half of my life. It was a pretty good chunk of my life, and I was like, and I'm friends with their dad on social media, and I'm like, well, it was the conversation that my mom and I had was like, is that something that I'm going to be able to handle being there? Because services were taking place in the Catholic Church where we went to school together. So there was a lot of heaviness in there. I hadn't stepped foot in that place in over 20 years. And there were going to be a lot of people that I went to school with that were there. And there were actually quite a handful of people. And so it became this thing, and this is not to, like, because I don't want to overemphasize making someone's passing, like, about me, but um just in terms of, like, having to grapple with, like, being in a space to pay my respects to someone that meant a lot to me as a kid, and to be there and to show my support for her family that I had been a part of for such a long time. um and then kind of grappling with the other sort of weirdness of it, of, like, how do we navigate that space. So my mom and I had to have a conversation, like, is this a good idea to go? And ultimately I made the decision, and I said, it's going to be weird for me, yeah, but this isn't about me. Like, this is about paying my respects to someone who meant something to me as a child, who, like, if I have to deal with the weirdness of, you know, like, it is what it is. And it ended up not being, it was awkward. But I had a friend, a really really dear, another dear childhood friend of mine, from elementary school, and we would kind of we lived in the same apartment building for 5 years, and he didn't go, but he's still best friends. Like, they had a core friend group. They've been best friends since, like, kindergarten, right? And also went to school with these guys, and they were like, they went to the service with me, and they were like, we have your back, like, we know this is gonna be uncomfortable, like, this is, but they were just, like, really supportive, so it was just kind of nice. And also, my friend who passed, her dad has been very interactive on my social media. He's been, like, a cheerleader and, like, very supportive. Like, he's also been affirming, and I'm like, to me that meant a lot. Which was another huge reason why I was like, yeah, I need to fly out there. I need to go. I need to be there and support, because, like, it means a lot to me. I saw a couple other friends from my childhood whose parents haven't seen me since fourth grade, fifth grade, maybe. Um, that were also incredibly just there was, you could tell there was some surprise, you know, in some, but we're also really supportive. And to me, I think it just speaks volumes about some of the people in my life, and just how incredibly blessed I've been to encounter so many great people that, like, even when it's been hard or awkward, like, at the end of the day, they're just, it's almost, it just restores your faith in humanity. Like, there are good humans out there that can be understanding and can be loving. um so I think that was probably the biggest takeaway from that sad experience, right? um but yeah, everybody, there wasn't any sort of talking about, like, maybe like a little bit here and there, but not really like before times. And uh all of these friends that knew me in a different time period, I didn't feel like there was any sort of awkwardness in interactions.
That's good. Thank you so much for sharing about that. Do you have any follow up questions?
Well, I was gonna. You said a lot about like support, having people to support you. What does that support look like? Or again, I think I like the idea of framing it as sort of advice. Like, you know, for people that want to be supportive, like how do you do that? What things are helpful, and maybe what things like are not helpful?
Sure, yeah. um I think that I think that depends on the person, right? Because I we all have different needs, and we all sort of, we all love differently, and we all need to be loved in a very particular way. um and so I think first and foremost is understanding yourself, like really taking time to like understand, okay, like, you have to know what you need first before you can communicate to other people how you need to be supported. I think is probably my number my number one kind of point of advice, right? Is having your own self-awareness and being like, okay, I got this part, these things on lock, but here's where I'm struggling, and I need XYZ pieces. I think for me, um I always struggled with affirmation. So anything that sort of felt like, especially in the early days, when again, kind of giving the family grace, right? If I get misgendered, especially in public, I think I was more hyper, like, defensive in public, because I'm in existing in this space, and I know how society is with people who identify like I do, and getting misgendered in public, or being called the wrong name, and then having the looks like that, the amount of anxiety just in those spaces. And I just remember being early on, like getting so frustrated and anxious because it was scary. um Especially if I felt like I was out and people were receiving me the way that I was hoping to be received, and then one of my friends kind of like, messes up, or like my family member, they mess up, and I'm like, damn it. Pardon my language, but like, damn it. I was like, we were so close. So I think for those who are looking to be the supporters, definitely asking. um I think continuing affirmation, and again, I can't speak for everyone, but I think as humans, we all just generally like being affirmed in one way or the other, is just regardless of who you are, how you identify, anything. Like, affirmation is so huge, just knowing that, like, there are people in your corner that see you and understand you and love you. um and then in terms of any other like areas of which, you know if there are certain specific needs that you have, that you don't feel like you have capacity yourself to meet. Really just communicating that with people that you feel you can trust, that are close to, and those who are supportive, like doing what you can.
I'm going to pivot a little bit. Um, can you tell me a little bit about how it was adjusting to life at Virginia Tech as someone that is trans?
Whew, hold on, let me take a sip of water before we get into that. No, it wasn't that bad, but so in 2014, I transferred. It's a Freudian slip there. Um, transition. Um, I transferred to Virginia Tech. I actually had a conditional offer because I had taken a semester off, and they were like, "Yo, you need to take a class over the summer before we're like gonna let you in." And I was like, "All right, cool, whatever." So I actually started in July of 2014 and did summer academy, and they had like a transfer track, so I was on that one. And but with summer academy, they have like they offer on campus housing. The transfer track, it's not like a requirement or anything, and they don't always offer it. But I was like, I don't know where I'm gonna live, so I'm gonna live on campus. um and kind of the first obstacle to overcome very, very early on in transferring was, okay, if I'm going to live on campus. I remember reading through the summer academy materials and kind of how on campus housing worked. They liked to keep, folks in the same dorms in order to kind of harness that community and, all that. And I was like, cool, yeah, get that. Um, that's not going to work for me. Just because I'm like, so having to have that courage to email housing and residence life, and not I don't know who's on the other end, right? Like, and at that time I hadn't had anything, nothing had been legally changed for me. So my name was still my dead name, and all my gender markers, nothing had I had only started T like half a year prior um to transferring. So I was like, hey, so here's the situation. I don't feel comfortable living in sort of the traditional dorm with like the shared bathroom space with everyone, because I my body's a little different, and that's a little anxiety inducing, and like I don't know how to navigate that. And the universe just blessed my whoever my spirit guide is. Like, I owe them so much after this life, I swear. Because the assistant director of housing and residence life at the time, who was just an absolute angel, she was like, yeah, no, like, we can, let's work to make some accommodations, right? There wasn't like, she just made me feel really welcome, and like she understood and was so, I will just speak volumes about this woman all day, every day, because she's absolutely incredible. Um, and so she helped kind of set me up in a space. I actually lived in the GLC for the summer in a room for myself, through everything. And then she helped me to kind of figure out my housing options for the year, because I was granted on campus housing for the academic year. Um, and this part's on me because I made the decision, because she gave me options for where I could live in the academic year. Um, I think West AJ was one, and then Pritchard was another. But I was like, oh well, like West AJ, like that's gonna cost more, and like that's gonna be more expensive. So I chose the cheaper option, which was a fumble on my part because why I chose Pritchard, I don't know. Because the they set me up in a dorm. They're like, I didn't have a roommate, which is probably good because I was 20. So living with a freshman, that would have been an interesting dynamic. um, and they put me in a room that was directly adjacent to the accessible bathroom, unisex accessible bathroom. Um, which I think when I first signed in, I was like, yeah, that's perfect, that's great. And then in reality, when I had actually, we'd moved in and everything, um, I ended up being really, really anxious because you're in that tight space. You have this shared hall, and it just kind of felt like eyes were already on me for the fact that I was older, living in that dorm, and the fact that I lived alone. So I had already sort of felt like, okay, radar is like you're this glowing light. Everybody's looking at you, and all those dark, fun mental health, fun thoughts and anxiety was just like, and then they're gonna think things because I'm like right next to this bathroom, like, oh my god. Um, so that was difficult. Um, that was a difficult transition. Because even in the summertime too, people are like, "Why are you living in the GLC? Why you live alone? Like, what's?" I'm like, "Why is it anybody's business? Leave me alone. Let me live. Like, just let me live my life. Stop asking me questions." Um. So that first year was really hard living on campus. Um. And I had shared with Anna during our pre-interview. I was like, "All right, this is the part where it gets kind of gross." But my hygiene was not great that year. Um. I was and my mental health was just a god awful mess too. Um, and on top of that, like having to deal with like I had just started in hormones not long before, so like being able to like also safely inject, um, this is an all around mess. uh, in terms of the living situation, um, and I think I just got overwhelmed. Like there are things now again like 2020 hindsight like I could have done differently. Like I probably could have been like reached out and said, actually, I'm not comfortable, you know eh, here's why, or kind of advocated a little bit more. But I think at the time I was just like, like I need to do what's affordable. Like I just need to make this work. um so that was an experience. And then I just wouldn't leave my room sometimes. I actually did not do summer academy. I did really, really well in my coursework. Then my academics kind of took a decline because I was just like, I don't want to leave my room. I was just in a really dark mental headspace. I went home a lot on the weekends. Or my romantic partner at the time, that was my girlfriend in high school, like she went to Radford during that time, so I would go over there sometimes. And I just wasn't I also think that like being a transfer student, I mean being a transfer student in general is just difficult. It's not You don't have the same level, like you've already done a little bit of college, so you have some of that under your belt. Um so trying to find community, being 20 years old in a space where there's like all these fresh freshmen and they're like doing all the crazy freshman things, and I'm like, I'm not there, but I'm not 100% there. Um, just in conjunction with struggling to with all the things that come with early transition days. It was a lot.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I'm gonna pause there just in case anybody has questions.
Okay. Okay. I do have two
Sure.
follow-up questions. One, I remember you had mentioned concerns about safely injecting for testosterone. Um, just can you expand on that if that like has anything to do with your living situation or like how that kind of like went into play?
I don't think necessarily to do with like not 100% to do with living situation. I think it's just that, like it was just something that I didn't really think about, like because at that time I was doing intramuscular injections, which are so I don't do those anymore. But it's like I did for the longest time I was doing intramuscular injections, and yeah, it was so for me because I had to stick a very large needle in my muscle for like it was very important to be in a space that like I wasn't going to be startled easily, and like because there's nothing worse than being in the middle of like that and then you get a jump scare because then your muscle's gonna it's gonna be very uncomfortable, um which I've learned the hard way once or twice. And also too, I think just from like a cleanliness standpoint, I mean those dorms are not I don't know how they are now, but it's notoriously not like one of the best one of the best places to live on campus, right?
Yeah.
um so I don't remember. I My memory is kind of blurry on this. I think at one point I was trying to see if like I could just get do them at Schiffer. I don't remember if I had like followed through or anything like that. Where like I vaguely remember at one point trying to see if there was like anything that where I could utilize services on campus to like go once a week and they just go ahead and do it in a sterile environment, and that be the end of it. Um, but yeah, I that's kind of that part is a little bit more of a blur to me. Um, just in terms of like how I handled, I have like zero recollection of how I. I don't know if I blacked that out or, um, and then I think you had another question too.
Mhm. I did. I know when we had met, you had mentioned gender inclusive housing. Was this experience of your when you transferred, was that the beginning of gender inclusive housing? Can you expand on
Yeah,
that?
so I think my first year preceded when they had actually instituted the gender inclusive housing policy. Um, and or it, I can't remember if it was a policy then. You're gonna have to fact check me on this one. If it was a policy my second
Okay.
year or if it was a pilot, they were piloting it. Um, because I kind of fell into that by accident. It wasn't intentional like, yeah, we're doing this and it's gender, inclusive housing. It was just like the circumstances just kind of worked out that way, and I happened to be one of the early people that was kind of adopting that, right? So my second year, because we had learned, and my mom was like, yeah, no, we're gonna get you somewhere. Like we're gonna get you, just go for just go for the better housing, right? It's better for you. And I was lucky enough to get a second year of on-campus housing. Through like the lottery or whatever sign up system. I just happened to be one of the lucky few, and reached out again to my dear friend and my guardian angel in housing and residence life, and we were like, all right, here we go again. Learned our lessons. cannot do another year of a Pritchard like dorm. Like, we can go for the, once I got the green light, my mom was like, for the love of God, just please, just get the better, just live in a better space, please. And I was like, all right, cool. Now I have this, this is where the affirmation comes in, the affirmation support that I mentioned. um, and, and so I was like, all right, cool. And I remember when we were talking about like trying to find a space. So my second year, I lived in Newhall West. Like a major glow up, major glow up. Um, and I was gonna end up living alone again. I think the way that we were gonna, I can't remember if it was like I was gonna have to pay the price of the two, like for the, I don't know, it was some sort of situation. And I remember she'd reached out, and there was another student who was in a similar situation to mine, and and so I was like, yeah, obviously, duh, like, no problem. They ended up not opting for the room. I think very similar to my situation. It was just like it was just too much, financially, which was completely understood. Um, so it just so happened that my partner, still same partner from high school, was transferring from Radford and didn't have anywhere to live. And I was like, well, I think it's silly if I have this, like, she didn't get on campus housing. Um, I'm like, well, I have this room to myself. Like, this is silly. Just move into this dorm room. Like, we're old enough now. Like, it's just, that was its own separate situation. Um, but I reached out and was like, hey, like, can so and so live with me? Like, obviously, I'm comfortable with them. And it just kind of was a win-win situation on both sides, and that's kind of how we just like fell into being part of the general. And it was, and again, it was because I don't know why the first three places I lived, transferring was just the talk of the town for whatever reason. It was just like it always came with questions. Now it went from why do you live alone for a year and a half to you live with your girlfriend in a dorm. Yeah. It's like like it worked out. She needed somewhere to live. I was living alone. Like, good lord, people. How does that work? It works. We're doing it. We actually had a really awesome space. I remember, this is like totally a tangent, but like we created a really solid living space. It was such a 180 from the year before. Um, and I remember my RA at the time, at the end, when we'd like finally moved out at the end of the academic year, being like, wow, like it felt weird for him to be in there because he's like, you guys really nailed like making it a homey space, and then it was kind of empty. So like a complete shift from like going from just being really down and not in a great space to finally like my space that feels like home. I have my person from home. Like, I have someone, my greatest support system living with me now, who's been with me since the beginning. Um, because we started dating like a month or two after it came out, and so that definitely helped a lot in terms of kind of boosting a little bit of the morale and the safety and the security, um and making the second year a little bit better.
Amazing. I know that you had also mentioned difficulty with being a transfer student and finding community. Do you mind telling us a little bit about how you were able to find community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. um I think early on, I like, so when I first came to tech, I was a theater major, with a cinema studies focus. That was before they had an actual cinema degree option. Um, so kind of in that first year is naturally just like gravitating towards, all right, like theater kids. Like I'm in this. Um, I think I still struggled though. I mean, part of it. This is kind of throughout my entire time in those first 4 years that I was at Tech, before going back. Like I just my mental health was just not just it just was not it. So I say that as a disclaimer because I think that my perception of my experiences at the time were clouded by just me being in my head and not like not really thinking about taking full ownership of the experiences at the time. So I say that because I do think that while it is difficult and overwhelming to find community, I also acknowledge the fact that like when I was younger and when I had transferred that I also could have done a better job of like seeking it out more, and I don't think I did. I didn't
Mhm.
really I think and this is actually kind of true in adulthood too, right? Is like when you're in school growing up, your community is there. Like you have it, right? Like it's just kind of given to you because you're
Mhm.
in school with these people for years or however it goes, and whatever extracurriculars your parents are taking you to outside of school, like it's that like you're already like kind of instantly gratified with people that are just available to you. I think and this being kind of a universal struggle for anyone entering college, regardless, again, like this is just sort of a universal general advice, is like or struggle that people might go through, which is when you're then thrown into a situation where you're learning how to be more autonomous. That transition in itself is a struggle, and then you're like, wait, I thought that I was just gonna be like I was gonna come in and it's gonna be like you know before, where like there's people here, I'm going to school with people, like yeah, I'm gonna have friends automatically. um and for some people that's true, like um I think for me, I it was just a lot. um being in a bigger campus, um being away from like my comfort zone. And it's weird because I am more of an extrovert. Like I can talk to a lamppost and somehow find meaning in that conversation, right? Like, but um, I just I was battling so many insecurities at that time. A lot of it still relating back to just kind of and this is actually tie into your previous question because now I'm sort of triggering memory. So forgive me for backtracking and going on a tangent, but when I transferred, I was like, I'm going to be stealth because, and I don't know if I actually really felt 100% committed to that, because I think I did still want people to know about me so that I knew that I could be my full self. Because when navigating that stealth life, it always feels like you're hiding parts of yourself and you can't fully be who you are. So I think some of that subconsciously sat in my mental health space, and why I felt like I wasn't seeking community enough, because I'm like, they're not going to see and understand me. And I think I placed a lot of blame on people around me, um, which I definitely felt sort of in my early major of like theater doesn't feel like it felt when I was in high school. And I'm like, yeah, it's not going to feel that way if you're not like engaging and pushing yourself enough to be out there and put yourself out there. But I just didn't feel comfortable enough to do that because I didn't know how it would be received, being more open. So there were a couple of people that I did slowly open up to about it, but I still just wasn't 100% myself. And I think I found myself kind of jumping around and just assuming I'm gonna find the people that like yeah, they're just gonna get me. Like that's not how that works. And this again goes back into like advocating for yourself, right? Knowing yourself enough to know how you need support. And it wasn't until spring 2016 that I found a little bit more of like a community that I really want to be a part of. It's the semester that um I pledged Alpha Phi Omega. It's a national co-ed service fraternity. And my pledging semester, I think of the 4 years that I was at Tech, that semester probably was one of my better semesters, aside from the final semester when I ended up graduating. But um, because I was engaging in volunteer service, like I was starting to make all of these new friends, and we were gonna be brothers, and it was like a whole big thing. And there was like so much. I put so much into that organization, like emotionally. Um, but then again, I think sort of later on in subsequent semesters, I started to feel kind of I think I put too many of my eggs in one basket. So probably my number one lesson and advice that I would give to anyone is like, yes, you will sometimes find your community in a specific organization or club, but that doesn't mean just stick to that only, because then it's like one of those things. If something goes off and things ebb and flow, and you get new people in and out, constantly, where you might not jive as well with a new group as you did with the old ones. And so really trying to diversify your options in terms of where you're finding community, just to give yourself breathing space, because I think I even found myself having like, I don't know, I was probably a little bit more toxic in terms of just like I put all of my eggs in this basket, and then when I felt like things weren't going in a direction that really fit me, um I kind of started to withdraw and just not be as engaged. And then I was like, well, that's it. That's my community, and I'm done. So, a lot of learning, a lot of lessons at a younger when you're the struggles of being young and in your 20s. And again, I there were a couple of people even in my at the time the chapter was huge. There were like, when I pledged, my pledge class was 40 people, and we had a chapter. I think there were like 99 active brothers. That doesn't even account for some of the ones who were kind of in like a taking a break from the chapter. So we were definitely like somewhere in the 150s, like as a huge organization. Um, but it was just another one of those spaces that I wasn't fully being myself. Um, and that just kind of, I think, became, for me at least, as I look back on like, if I had just been more confident in saying, "Yep, this is who I am. Take me or leave me," um, and just embracing and allowing me to be me and getting out of my head more, I think I would have found more success, and I would have not struggled as much.
Gotcha. I think also you had mentioned trying to be self when you were like in the early days. And then you I know in the pre-interview you had mentioned when you came back around like
Mhm.
2021-ish, that you were allowed, or you felt more comfortable being open. Can you expand on that a
Yeah,
little bit?
no, really great question. This magical thing happens. I mentioned this to to this to Anna in the car. It's like this wonderful thing happens as you start getting older. You care a lot less. It's so great. It is the underrated part of getting older that no one ever talks about. Um, but also, I mean, also to that point, I think oddly enough, without getting too much into like my romantic life, although that I think is also a very interesting point to talk about in terms of like dating in college and things like that as a trans person, right? Um, but it really was my dating life that kind of got me to be more like I have to tell people, I have to disclose this all the time, and I'm just like, "Ah, forget it. Like I cannot. I am so tired of constantly coming out, coming out, coming out all the time. Let's just put it out there." And so I finally at 26 was like, whatever. We're embracing this now, and we're going to be open. We're going to talk about it more. So when I came back to Virginia Tech at 27, I had already been like, yeah, I'm just talking about it. I'm just throwing that fact out there. Like I I think after a good amount of time, meeting new people, telling them, people loving and accepting and knowing that like, okay, I have friends, my family's cool, everybody around me, like I know that I have community and I have people that I can lean on. So now it's just like if I put myself out there, um do I still fear for security and safety? Yeah, especially now. But when I came back, I was like, I'm older. I like I've now lived a little bit more life having left school and being out in the real world and getting a little bit of work experience under my belt, that coming back, I'm like, I'm here to focus on finishing this thing that I started, that I really need to like wrap up and wrap up this chapter. And so I think when I came back, um it also really enriched my discussions in the classroom because I started talking about my identity in my classes. And it was a semester I had two queer professors, so it that also kind of helped in terms of making connections with the people who were teaching me, in my classes. And I came back to a very different campus. Um, when I first came to Virginia Tech, there was no Pride Center. What's in Squires now feels like a fever dream, right? And that's for my generation, right? Like I can only imagine the generations that preceded mine. Um, Definitely feels like I'm like, right, like untouchable back in the day. Um, I started to see there was more of a presence, and not even just necessarily like from like the queer standpoint, but I'm also a person of color. So like I wasn't just noticing the increase in visibility from a queer frame of mind, but like also as a racial minority, I was like, am I where am I? Like I was like, this is incredible. This is, and that importance of visibility, and I'm like, wow, okay, like I've only been gone for a couple of years now, and this is how much we've progressed in terms of diversifying our student body. And like it's no longer like seeing a few token people that I'm like, oh hey, like there's more of a presence in a way that didn't feel as strong before. And then of course, with a lot of the different groups, and then living learning communities, which I know is a hot button topic right now, in the current state of affairs around that, which is really disappointing. But like coming back in 2021, I was like, okay, hell yeah, like this is amazing. Like I felt a new surge of energy in being a Hokie, and like what it meant to be a Hokie, that I was like, I can be myself now, and I can celebrate this and have richer discussions in class with my peers. And it just changed the whole experience in a way that like I think made it easier for me to come back. Like, it makes it easier for me to come back as an alum and do things like this or participate in alumni events, when I first left Virginia Tech, I had no intention of coming back. I wanted nothing. I was like, no, I'm done. Um, so it was a huge shift for me in terms of, you know, feeling that level of comfort and just like, cool, I can be myself, and I can bring that perspective into my studies, integrate that into the work that I'm doing. Right, because I ultimately graduated with a psychology degree, so being a social sciences major, like, definitely um, a huge topic to kind of weave into the classroom and what we were doing. Um, so I definitely take a lot of pride in being able to do that and feeling the comfort and the confidence and just fully embracing all sides of me, because it really made a difference.
Hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about, if you don't mind talking about it, the just like what were the circumstances around like the
Mm.
first time you left tech, and whether you and whether anything in particular made you decide to come back, or whether anything in particular, just the
Yeah,
general situation
no.
there.
So I really struggled. um so many things. I mean, my mental health has been, it ebbs and flows, right? And at that period of time, I think all throughout my entire 20s, um and I'm not even that far in my 30s, so we're still we're still coming off of this, right? Was just a very tumultuous time for me, mentally and emotionally. I had like zero motivation. I was lost in terms of what I wanted to do, because I think my second year, I'd like at the end of my second year, I'd left the film program and I was like, I'm gonna do art. And then I was like, did well in the summer classes. Apparently, me and summer are fantastic, and I should have just done all my schooling in the summer. But then it was like, then I like hit a downfall again in the fall, and then I'm like, all right, no more, not doing art. Let's go to psych. And then I was like, oh, I'm in psych now. Great. And then something wasn't clicking there. And then I was like, all right, fine, back to film, because we already started this journey. Um and then eventually it got to a point where like my grades fell so low, and I was just not going to classes because I was so checked out. And it's not necessarily because I was like, screw it, I don't want to go to class. I just like would have these periods where I would just fade out, and I was just like, I'm too, like, there's no, what is life, there's no purpose. Like, I dealt with a lot of just really deep dark spaces in my brain, and ended up actually getting academically suspended, was like one of the reasons why. But even prior to that, like, because I'd been mentally checked out and withdrawn, I was like, there's nothing for me here, like, I don't care, like, I'm leaving. And that's just like the headspace that I was in when I left. um so that wasn't great. But I then I did my first term in AmeriCorps, and I still wasn't, my mental health still was not great. Like, it was just kind of, there was just this build up until finally I had a really bad episode. Um, that was kind of tied into a romantic relationship at the time, different from my high school girlfriend. Um, but that landed me inpatient. Um, and there was just a lot of stuff that I had worked on during this period of time. 25. I was 25 at the end of my AmeriCorps term, and after kind of
Sorry,
oh
if
yeah.
if I could ask you, you mentioned AmeriCorps.
Oh
Could
yeah,
you just explain what that is?
AmeriCorps is like a the domestic version of the Peace Corps. So essentially, there are a bunch of different programs out there where different individuals can serve and go out in their communities and kind of do a lot of like social impact work in various subject areas, like whether it's food insecurity or education. So there's a bunch of different venues you can go down. And so I had moved to Maryland, and was in a rocky relationship at the time while I was going through this, and so there was a lot going on with me that finally kind of came to a head. And after going through the programs that I went through with my mental health in my inpatient stay, and then kind of transitioning out, there was like a day program where it was like a transitional program where you're still going pretty intensive therapy for like a couple of weeks to kind of assimilate back to like normal life and how to deal with habits and things. And throughout that journey was when I was like, there was a really great social worker that I'd been working with, and I'm like, okay, well, that kind of put a spark in me, like, all right, I need to do something with my life that helps people in the way that this program helped me. So once I kind of felt like I was kind of rising from that, I with AmeriCorps you get an education stipend, so I had money to go back to school. So I just was like, I'm gonna start small, and I'm just gonna do community college, back to community college classes, and just kind of continue coursework from there. And I was starting to do really, really well in school, where I feel like actually meeting my academic potential. And then a lovely little thing called the pandemic hit. And I just kept doing school. Like I was like, all right, yeah, we just semester after like, nonstop. I was like, we're just gonna keep going, and we're gonna keep driving through. And I decided during the pandemic to do a second AmeriCorps term. Um, during COVID, and I moved to Philly, and we were all virtual for all of that. So I was like, well, all right, well, my work's virtual, and I kept doing school. It was like a period of time where it was like I was, serving in my AmeriCorps term. That's 40 hours a week and doing 16 credit hours in a semester simultaneously. Would not recommend. Do not do that. Would not recommend. Don't do it. Don't do it. But, I was just like in this point where it's like, all right, I'm energized. I can do these things and actually still do well in school. And I had started taking classes actually during that semester too. I was taking classes between the community college that I had started at, and I decided to take classes again at Virginia Tech, because when I was looking, I'm like, all right, so based on the coursework that I've been doing, just for shiggles, I was like, let me check the degree audit report and see if I transferred some of these credits back, how close would I be to graduating, to finishing my bachelor's at Tech, versus like going to another university, because I was like, let's just see, let's give it. And I had done enough work to where it was like, oh, you only need like, I think it was like 20 some credits to finish my degree, like in psych at Tech. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm like, okay, well, just, and so I started kind of eased back by taking some of that coursework online, because campus had not opened up yet. And then by the time I'd finished my AmeriCorps term and the fall semester was kind of slowly, encroaching, I was like, yeah, okay, I can go back. Campus was open again. The first half we were still masked up, but I was like, great. Like, I think it would be really awesome to just go back, close out this chapter in person, and and so I did. Um, and was very yeah was very very grateful to be back. And now still, still have struggled with mental health issues kind of along the way, but it definitely not as not as debilitating by the time I was back at tech. And it was just like really easy to kind of like focus and be like, cool, full speed ahead. And it felt really good. Felt really good to like come back to something where like I knew that my history, especially academically, was not strong. Um, so I kind of was like slowly digging myself out of a grave. Um, Especially in trying to bring my GPA back up to good standing, and then ultimately, my final semester at Tech, I ended up making dean's list. Like all of my grades, like once I came back, um, were like smooth sailing, and I was like, yes, like we are where we need to be. My overall GPA was just enough to graduate. um, my in major was like way better, but yeah, it was nice. It was nice to close out that chapter and finally and kind of feel like getting closure. And then also again, kind of what I had mentioned earlier, coming back and finishing, like feeling a lot closer to just like my most authentic self.
That's amazing. Thank you. Do you have anything else? Okay. Give me 1 second.
I'm gonna take another water.
Okay.
Sweet. So ask your question.
Okay. Okay. We have one more question. What would you like? Well, okay. I think it's okay. Okay, one more question. Is there anything? Okay, wait. Sorry. So sorry. What would you like younger people or students at Virginia Tech to
I
take
feel like
away from this
there's
interview?
much to learn from all the chaos that is my life. Um, is slash was my life. I think first and foremost, especially because I'm privy to what's going on campus now, with, and then I know that there's like an upcoming another board of visitors meeting where they're talking more about DEI related topics on campus. You know, even when those resources are not available to you, there are still ways in which you can find resilience and community. I think the biggest thing right now is that like taking away or like a big takeaway, and I think a win is the fact that there is so much more visibility on campus now than there used to be. Um, that the communities are like, well, right now they're just surviving, right? Um, I think in contrast to what previous generations have experienced, like in a sense, I feel like it's still thriving. Whether or not the support is there from the institution, the support is there from the community in ways that are a lot more, at least in terms, compared to my experiences. I know like I've heard some of the other generations are like, we were an underground thing. I was like, that's cool. but but the downside to being an underground community is that like not everybody knows how or where to find you, whereas like now it's like, the community is like there. It's visible. You see it everywhere you go, which I didn't feel as much the first go around. I knew people that were in, so I think finding some, hopefully to find a little bit of comfort in that,
Mhm.
um that you all have each other in ways that, um maybe some of us didn't feel like, we could see, um would be number one, especially just with everything going on right now. um and to just keep showing up and advocating. um it was really difficult to, and scary, and I don't think about it. I didn't think about it in the time, because when I was going in the moments, I'm not like, oh, what I'm doing is brave. Like, what I'm doing, I'm like, no, I'm just a person that's just like trying to get needs met that I need in order to like survive. Like just my basic human rights, shelter, food, like all those kinds of things, to feel comfortable. But like, but it is bold, because I think, when I think back to even just that period of time where I was able to speak to, the assistant director in housing residence life, who was helping me kind of navigate my housing situation, and then her knowing, hey, like, I can reach out to this person and be like, there's somebody else who's kind of in a similar boat as you, right? Like, she wouldn't have known that she could kind of come to me for that, and like help that person, if I hadn't said something. So when we don't always think, like, because we're just living life and going through the things, but like the more that you speak up and the more that you're advocating for yourself, the more you're planting the seed. And it's not always, change doesn't happen overnight. I mean, we've been fighting all these different issues left and right for years and years to come. And sometimes all it takes is just sparking one person, having a conversation with one person, being open with them, so that way they can then be an advocate, and kind of continue to go out, the ripple effect. Um, so just finding that confidence within yourself to advocate for your needs, and not being afraid to be vulnerable, um, and just continuing to, I mean, I've had a lot of ups and downs. I still have ups and downs. Um, Such as life. That's just life is she's rough and relentless. Um, but continuing to, like, even when you get knocked down, and even if you are someone who might be like me, where you stand in your own way and kind of knock yourself down sometimes, um, that every day that you are lucky enough to take a breath and be alive is a chance to start fresh and to keep pushing forward. Um, Again, I think that's a lot easier said than done, but, I think continuing to just be and work towards the best version of yourself would probably be another thing that's like totally separate of identity or anything like that. Like, that's probably the number one thing that I hope that anyone learns from anything that they learn about me in my life and all the things that I've gone through, is that, like, every single day is an opportunity to work towards being better and doing better, whether that's for yourself or whether, the community around you. Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. That's fun.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thank you so much. Yay. Yes. Yay.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really good.
Yeah.